Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show, a podcast by SaaStock. Here we interview SaaS founders from around the world who've been there and done that, as they share the ins and outs of how they built their businesses, their operations, their path to securing investment, and more. Our mission with the podcast is to help you, the founder, learn how to scale your SaaS, maintain your well-being, and navigate the complexities of this ever-changing industry. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, and together we'll explore the good, the bad, and the ugly in the journey to SaaS success. Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I am your host, Alex Theuma, CEO, founder of SaaStock, also general partner at Back Future Ventures. Delighted to be joined today ahead of his appearance and speaking at SaaStock Europe, which is on the 14th and 15th of October in Dublin, by the co-founder and CEO of PolyAI, Nikola Mrkšić. How are you doing, Nikola?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Good to have you on the podcast. Obviously now having a virtual conversation, but soon we'll get to meet in Dublin, and very excited for you to come over and all the great, kind of like AI, first and AI native, founders and companies that will be there and, getting together in person. Ahead of that, we have this opportunity to learn more about you and your story and building PolyAI, which is, I think, certainly one of the most exciting AI companies, in Europe and, coming out of the UK. Nikola, I'd love to know, because I think you've got quite an interesting background from, coming from Belgrade, understand that you wanted to be a writer, perhaps science fiction, maths, and going into Cambridge and how this spun out. So I'd love you to kind of share that story a little bit.
Oh, for sure. Look, I think I said that in one podcast, and now it's become like the main theme. No, look, I had a very classical kind of like Eastern European upbringing that, maths all the way, STEM, and nothing else exists, competing in maths, programming, and all of those things. I think in that episode, I think the other fun part is, there's classical Eastern Europe, and then there's like former Yugoslavia, Serbia in the 90s, which is, civil war land, country falling apart, a lot of instability. So I think at one point I wrote 5 kind of like Star Trek inspired tribute sci-fi stories, right? And I had this idea of just going around like cafes and trying to like sell them to people, see if someone reads them. I don't really know what the end game was, to be very honest with you, but I came up with this like packaging where basically you could like buy 3 or 5 at different prices. And I remember distinctly, there was a day where I made like, I think 200 or 300 euros. Now the average Serbian salary that year, the monthly salary was like 200 or 300 euros. So that felt like I was walking around with this bag full of money, and I was like, there's a way to hack it. And I think, a lot of startup growth and all of that almost feels the same, in that there's a lot of theory and, what the averages are and what slightly better is. And then sometimes you just have these breakthroughs, and sometimes it's way harder than the textbook says. And sometimes you just find an opening and then you got to use it, because God knows it's not easy building those things as well. So, I ended up at Cambridge doing computer science and maths. Towards the end of kind of like my master's, and I met a guy who was starting a company called Vocal IQ. He dropped out of a Cambridge lectureship to do that, and he was starting with another Cambridge professor. So a very classical Cambridge story where it's kind of like, a spin out of people who were among the first to do deep learning for voice assistants back when no one cared about it, right? They had been working on it before Siri was a thing, right? So that company ended up acquired by Apple a year and a half later. And I ended up doing a PhD with Steve Young, one of the 2 co-founders and a legend in the field. And then deep learning really took off, right? So whatever you were doing, it just started working 10 times better every year. And it hasn't really stopped ever since. But what got me interested in building a company that would kind of like do B2B, agents for customer service, which, I wouldn't have told you I was going to do 10 years before, right?
Yep.
Was the fact that, when Apple acquired us, people would ask, where do you work? Apple? What do you work on? Siri? Siri is shit. And you'd go, okay, like, fair. Some things didn't work, some things did, but there was more than just, I said this and it wasn't understood. I think the mismatch between our sci-fi style expectation of what this assistant would be and how we would use it, and the actual reality was so wide that you could be nothing but disappointed. And truth be told, it was less to do with Siri, herself and more to do with the expectations. So to me, kind of like the methodical approach was, let's narrow the problem down to something a bit more manageable where we can both hopefully do it way better relative to expectations and measure whether we're doing well, improve every year. So to build a company, you need like to delight customers, get more usage, get paid for it, get data, improve the product, delight them even more. So the cycle there that was very obvious was customer service, because believe it or not, today, as well as 5 years ago, about 2% of the working population in the UK and the US works in contact centers. So despite all the automation, all the deflection, all the chatbots, it hasn't really shifted all that much. And that's ignoring the probably equal amount of labor done offshore support enterprises in Western societies around providing customer service. So, it takes a village to provide a customer service to your customers, and most companies today are doing it quite badly. And AI has a lot to give there, but it has yet to give a lot, right? In terms of just transforming that whole state.
Is that 2% you think going to become 1% and 0.5% because of AI? Is that how you would
Yes.
you would see it potentially? Yep.
I think it will lead to definitely a 5x reduction over some span of time. Whether it's 3 to 5 years remains to be seen. It's not that important. I think what I'm really excited by and that we're witnessing in a lot of our deployments is that it creates a new generation of knowledge workers. It gives like social mobility to the best, brightest, hardest working people in the contact center. That's historically been quite hard for companies to do, to identify people there and, promote them up and extract talent, because they get, wherever you get a lot of people going through your company, there's a lot of talent going through. Whether you're identifying it and moving it to the place where you need it most, probably not. But if you have them, you should identify them. And I think that with the contact center transforming into this place where you have humans and AI, not working really side by side, but working on different things, the best paid job and the most exciting job becomes that of the future air traffic control for AI. Because if you have AI doing 80% of the work, any mistake, well, like the upside is huge, not to mention the cost savings and the ability to pick up the phone or answer a chat request any time of day or night in whatever language, the spiel. It's really that if something goes wrong, it goes wrong at a scale that humans could never pull off, right? So there, it really will start to resemble air traffic control, where it's, like it's gonna pay to have levels and levels of supervision and just, continuous improvement, both for the sake of improvement, but also for the sake of having assurances that you don't start, issuing product returns to people who called you about, an upsell or something like that.
You started the business in 2017,
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps like back then we call it like machine learning, deep learning is like conversational, intelligence, perhaps still. Would you say though that over the last couple of years, I mean, obviously with this fast pace of the new AI like developments, like has there really been like an inflection point, like a wave that has, in a positive way, like impacted you as a business? Are you able to correlate that?
100%. Look, I think the first 3-4 years we were building prototypes, and really we were what you would look at as a classical research lab, right? When the ratio of PhDs and postdocs to employees is over 50%, it's a fake company when it comes to really being a company, right? It's something else.
Yeah.
Really, it's around 21 only that we had like the first pilots and things running, and then it kind of like really started growing, and it was growing fast even pre the ChatGPT moment, and then it exploded when Sam Altman and Ilya did their magic, because not only did the capabilities start evolving, they both jumped in, like what an LLM could do is very different from what you could do with the previous machine learning approaches, but more importantly, I don't know if it's more important, it's equally important, the interest of enterprises and their belief that this can be done with technology has changed profoundly, and it shifted from early adopters pressing and finding for wiggle room inside their organizations to buy this kind of software and implement it, into boardrooms screaming at people about not implementing AI already as if they themselves knew how. But that's good, because it just gives you a way to not do pilots at the fringe of a company and then look for other ways and other backers to kind of like sponsor a wider rollout, which we have at this point gotten really good at doing. And there's still a level of it, right? But now when the CIO is banging on the table and demanding that AI be implemented, and you are a credible vendor with case studies, things are never easy for a growth stage startup, but man, it's a lot easier than it was.
What about, I mean, like maybe some of the challenges around the pace of development, right? Because I guess what is true today won't necessarily be true in a couple of months' time. It's just going so fast. So you may have to rewrite, parts of the product. And I don't know how are you finding that internally within the organization and for yourself, as the challenge building on something today, and then, in 2 months' time, it could be something else. And you've probably already experienced this.
Oh, absolutely. Look, on the one hand, it's what we've been preparing for our whole lives, because I think we are unique among our broader set of competitors in that we're actually researchers who worked on this on the model front, and then we went into kind of the enterprise trenches fighting for adoption and clients and wide rollouts. So I think we have a better intuition than any of our competitors around how every change will impact the stack. Now, I was at the OpenAI launch party at NIPS long ago and spoke with Ilya about how much structure you should have in neural nets, and he of course insists that you should have none, and it's all about data. And even though I was a deep learning zealot, I thought he was really out there in terms of the ambition. He was right about everything, right? So to say that we know what's going to come next would be foolhardy. We do not, right? I think we can talk about fine-grained assumptions and what we think will happen, but at this point we might as well be talking about tonight's football game and how I think it's going to go, right? So I think you just have to be agile. The challenge, I think, in a B2B company, and frankly, even for OpenAI, you saw it with the GPT-5 launch, is you try to tie your user base to your new model and to the next thing and the next thing. But it will always break some assumptions that are important to different parts of your customer base. And then, it's a one-by-one transition for all of them. Sometimes it's a flip of a switch. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes you need their buy-in, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's really hard to do and you have to re-implement the whole thing. So the bigger the business, the slower you get. And that's where, the heart of disruption always lies, where you have to be as fast as you can be, and it is inversely correlated with how big you are as a company. So, we're sizable, but still quite small, so we're managing. But, it gets harder and harder the more clients we have.
What about for yourself personally? Is I guess kind of coming out of the research labs, being this technical founder, creating a very technical product, then going to have to sell this to enterprise. What were some of your learnings from that you could share?
Yeah, listen. I think in Europe we have this learned helplessness, tech founder, la la la. You get treated far worse in Europe being a tech founder, and everyone assumes that you're this moron who can't sell, talk, or do anything else, and you're expected to stay in your hole. In America, they celebrate tech founders, and they like them more, as they should, because those are full stack people who, if they can't sell, they can't sell. They shouldn't be CEO or whatever, right? I never really thought of myself as, I obviously I'm a deeply technical founder, right? But equally, if you're investing in any one of these Eastern Europeans that went to these specialist schools and moved on, know that they had to do that to get to where they were, right? That was the ticket. So much like in America, you get a lot of people who play college football and then never look back. I think competing in maths for a lot of the former Soviet bloc is literally the same thing as Americans playing sports to get a scholarship. So I was never really, had that hell bent on being technical, although obviously I know a lot about it and enjoy it. But yeah, to learn how to do it, I think someone who studied something non-technical has to learn how to build and scale an enterprise software company all the same. I don't think there's a college degree that will teach you that. Key insights, I don't know. I think it's just founder sales all the way. You have to lean in because you are initially a one-man, then maybe a 2, 3, not very large group of people that is at the heart of looking for that product market fit, right? As you're selling, you're tweaking the product and the product offering. Half of it is probably not even built at the time that you're selling the first thing. So you have to have a very quick iteration loop, and the best way to have that is to have a single person or a few of them tightly integrated, owning the whole thing. And I think a cardinal sin, especially in Europe, is this whole oh, look, technical founder, now let's hire them. A killer head of sales. The truth is the killer head of sales who can really sell any software easily. A, there aren't that many of them. B, they're working at very large companies making 7-figure like, paychecks every year. And why would they, go through basically being a co-founder with that person early on? So there's no silver bullet. You're going to have to do it on your own, and you should do it on your own. That's actually where the fun is.
In terms of, so you're selling to the enterprise. In terms of coming up with the pricing for PolyAI, have you done this based on like outcome-based, pricing, looking at like these are the savings that we're going to make you as a customer by, replacing human labor and perhaps software in that? Like how have you come to the price points which you're at the moment?
That's all very nice and theoretical, right? Like if I knew everything about your business, I could price it fairly. If you
Yep.
were willing to share it all with me, if you even knew it yourself, and if you were the decision maker in charge of making that decision and betting on the right outcome-based thing. There are companies that think that way, and they love it priced that way, and we love pricing it that way because we make way more money, right? And the incentives are aligned, and it all makes sense. A lot of others look at it as, an analogous thing to the picks and shovels they can buy from the hyperscalers and others and have their IT teams build. And to those guys, you will, like, the customer is always right. So you will sell in the way that the customer wants to buy. Like about half of our contracts, if maybe even 60%, are consumption-based. The rest are outcome-based. And, that outcome is so heterogeneous that I think there's a bit too much excitement about it now as if it's just a silver bullet. It is not. It is really hard to price outcome-based things the right way. When you can do it, it's magic. But equally, I think you would be mistaken to be an early stage company who thinks that, just saying that it's going to be outcome-based so you don't pay when it doesn't work. It's like they're paying you and spending time with your worthless little company that has proven nothing yet, right? So, or proven very little. So know that your enterprise, like respecting an enterprise is to understand that them spending time with you and going through all this is an investment, a serious one that they've prioritized over many other things that they probably need to do, right? So they're already paying for working with you, and they've already put you ahead of many other things that they're no doubt being asked to do. Not just your competitors for your single thing, but many other things, right? So understanding that is, I think, where a lot of early stage guys really just are narcissistic, and it's like, but me, if I give it to you for free and it doesn't work, why would you not work with me? Because I could be outside cleaning my shed instead, right? And maybe that will give me higher ROI. Maybe changing my ERP system or my CRM or God knows what else will be higher ROI. So I think there you just really have to think about what is your product and how do people, like the people you're selling to, what kind of software do they buy from what kind of people, right? And you have to match that, and that will reduce the friction. Now, of course, maybe you are the god of sales and you've come up with a genius thing that's immediately obvious to everyone. If so, proceed. If not, you're probably going to have to learn about how software tends to be priced in what you're doing, and you're going to have to mirror a lot of it, if not all of it, in the first instance.
Your talk at SaaStock Europe in a couple of weeks' time is Lessons in Scaling Enterprise AI, how PolyAI made voice agents deliver real ROI. Can you give a couple of insights? Because we obviously don't want to, give the whole talk away here, nor do we have time. But on, some of like how you've been able to use voice agents to deliver ROI, and also what people can expect from your talk.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think one of the main insights has been that people that are going to use AI to make their company the best version of itself are not starting with that whole, I'm going to cut some costs. Because in the hierarchy of needs when selling, cost is like a distant fourth, right? $1 earned is a lot better than $1 saved. Compliance and risk also rank more highly because you get fired if you mess something up. And then cost savings are nice to have. So our explosive product market fit started in hospitality first. We sold to restaurant groups and casinos. 1 in 2 groups in Vegas runs PolyAI right now. Why? Because if they don't pick up the phone and it's someone calling to make a booking, either they will not make the booking or they'll make it online through an online travel agency and they'll lose 20 to 30%. So we're just helping them make more money, and that just like follow the money, right? So there we've had outcomes like, per casino site, we increased like annual revenue by like 5 to 10 million. For large restaurant groups, again, like tens of millions of revenue uplifts. And that's just like, it stops being negotiated. Like if it works, it works. It's worth trying. The other part maybe that's interesting for that audience is just, it happens a little bit more easily in America. both because there's a lot more money sloshing around and because culturally Americans tend to be a bit more, free thinking. They allow mid-high level executives to make calculated bets and just see whether it works or not. And if it does, great. And if not, so what? Whereas I think in Europe, there's a bit more of the consensus blame game around why did you spend that money? Did we all sign up to it? And that just creates friction. Now, when you look at our largest deployments and, beyond hospitality, it's really about improving customer experience in one shape or another. It's large enterprises whose customer service collapsed because they just can't have enough agents. They can't train them well enough, right? So their CSAT dropped, their waiting times got elongated, and they were like, what are we going to do? Let's throw AI at it, right? Especially today when AI is a lot more, it's more culturally accepted that AI will work and will continue to improve, right? So it's easier for them to make this bet. That's one piece. The second piece is like just improving NPS scores, right? Once you show that, for a bank, for instance, we improved NPS score by 14, and that moves them a whole category of like what kind of bank you are to your customers, and that's just so valuable that all debate falls off, right? And I remember one of my early guys had this magic sentence. He would walk in and just say, "We're going to cut 20% of your OpEx," and I think the guy expected everyone to just be like, "Oh my God, wow, yeah, where do I sign?" And that's where I just learned that whole cost cutting and the way that I think the media and everyone just thinks of AI as an evil CEO and CFO sit down and say, we're going to cut the agents. Like, that's not how the real world works. The real world is struggling to hire enough agents already. So if you give them a button to click to have more agents, and if all it took was to pay them 10 or 20% more, and they didn't have to hear about it every day, they'd probably press that button, right? So the problem is not what people think it is, like these overcrowded contact centers where people are like fearing for their lives about AI automating their livelihoods. No, like in most places where we implement, people are excited. They start using it, and those that are excited are the ones that were there for a long time and they tend to stick. The others are just kind of like tourists. They come in for a few months, they leave, and like will there be fewer of those in the future? Yep. Will it mean that someone might not have a job they need for a few months? Potentially, but they'll probably have a job annotating stuff for other companies building out models to do something that we're not even thinking about yet.
Well, looking forward to watching the full talk in Dublin at SaaStock. I'm curious to know, as a CEO, what AI tools you're using, maybe like on a day-to-day basis, to help you do your job, make you more efficient, make you more productive.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that like ChatGPT has become like my operating system for like absolutely everything. I was thinking this morning, I used Google for some reason. I was like, oh, I haven't used it in days, right? So I think 6 months ago, I was talking to people and thinking that I'm probably like 50-50. I literally like don't even use Google anymore. I don't think it's a very controversial statement. I think other good tools. I don't do a lot of coding, but I think Lovable is great, and I think it's great for illustrating kind of like the prototypes and things in product discussions. And then obviously, as you implement, you need a bit more, but I think it's really powerful, and the team uses it like amazingly. Claude Code is good. Granola is a fantastic tool. I've been a fan of Gong for a long time, but I think Granola is like where, and this is quite close to what we do, so I know the kind of like things they have to do to make things work, and I appreciate them, right? Because Gong has not made some of those things work, even though we've been like captive to them. And Gong's quite heavyweight. Like me joining a one-on-one with you, and then like a PolyAI note taker joining, and like it's always been this like pomp and unnecessary. Whereas with Granola and like the ethos of just like notes and stuff, I think it's like a really, really good tool. Yeah, I no longer write many lines of code, but like Cursor is like really heavily used internally, and yeah.
On ChatGPT, like what would be some of the use cases you like? Are you using it to draft emails, social posts, like memos? Like what would be like a couple of recent use cases that you've used it from a business CEO perspective?
Yeah, look, I think that outlining long memos of things, Amazon style, has never been my forte because I'm a talker. I'm not bad at writing, but it requires a context shift that I tend to find very difficult to do. So it's allowed me to, like, with 30 minutes instead of 3 hours, write out, I don't know, complete new pricing, what, why, how, like 20 pages. I think that's really good. I think in different kind of like presentations and stuff like that, it's phenomenal for wordsmithing and all that. Social posts and stuff, it definitely accelerates you. I think there's a definite kind of like degradation in the level of content you see on LinkedIn and stuff. And when I write, I'm quite serious about doing a good job. It's very obvious when the tone of the person is not coming through. So in those posts and stuff, I tend to not use it all that much because I think the algorithm will punish you for being yet another, sentences of da 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 top, like
Yep.
it's all sensationalist. It reads like a Daily Mail article, and it's the number of hyphens, bullet points, and weird emojis is just kind of like whatever.
Yep.
Do you use it for that?
I've experimented for sure. So I try and post daily on LinkedIn. I would say most, but not all. If I've used ChatGPT to I'll draft the post, ask it to create a more polished AI version. And yeah, I think you definitely. I would say I definitely feel that I'm punished by the LinkedIn algorithm from doing that. So for me, when I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, it has improved my post. And again, I don't know if this is this psychological effect there, but in general, I would say they don't perform as well. But I have seen people I don't know if you're familiar with Adam Robinson, who runs RB2B, and he's quite popular on LinkedIn. He would write spend a lot of time as a CEO writing 3 posts a week, but now he's trained and he's open about this, trained ChatGPT to write like him, to then buy back all the time that he was spending as a CEO on writing, and still seems to be performing pretty well. But he has a large audience now, right? Yeah. So I think that's what you can lean into.
Listen, I think that it improves, for most people, it vastly improves their content, right?
Yeah.
I think actually it's fairly non-controversial for everyone. It can improve it, right? But there is just this stream of GPT thought where it's agents talking to agents, and it's okay, you know what? There's a part where you kind of are hungry for your voice, or a grammatical error here and there, to just know that someone actually, because why do we post daily? Do you have we know why, because we're doing demand gen and all that, right? But do you genuinely every day have something worthwhile to share with the world? I don't.
Yeah.
Not every
No.
right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think is just the consistency versus I think the best people at that get excited to the dopamine rush of getting 1,000 likes. And honestly, welcome back to high school, right? You're just waiting for someone to poke you on LinkedIn.
What's next for PolyAI? What's over the next 6-12 months, and again in this rapid pace of the AI era, what's next for you guys?
Yeah, my North Star is the number of companies for whom we do the work of 1,000 people or more, right? At the moment, we've got 3. I'd like that number to be at least double in 6 months, and double again in another 6 months. And that's really, I think, the most important growth trajectory, because, who's paying you what, and all of that, or how many you captured in the long tail of some kind of PLG, ZergRush. It can be great. It can be a leading indicator for great things, or it could just be noise, right? I think that we're a B2B company, and the only real measure of it is the impact it's had on those companies. That decides how sticky they are, and really just how good our product is, right? Whether it deserves to be used and to be used by more companies. So, we're on track for those things, and it's really, the goal is just to have a bigger impact on the world. And yeah, that's mostly large enterprises, mostly in the US, some in the UK, a few in continental Europe. And I think that shape is likely to remain similar for the next 2 years.
Well, Nikola, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. Looking forward to seeing you in Dublin on the 14th of October. And yeah, really appreciate you sharing with the SaaStock community your journey, or parts of your journey so far, and lessons, and looking forward to seeing more at SaaStock.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to seeing you there.
See you there.